All right, I was a little too fast there. We have this one more slide with some theory on it, and the point is we've already got this equation. This is from the last slide, but the problem is that it's very hard to ever actually observe CH and CF in data, because what does it really mean? These are the amount that you consume. That's not something that we typically see in trade data. What we see in trade data is the amount that you spent on the good. So, we might observe domestic production, the value of domestic production, but we might have a hard time distinguishing what's a price from what's a quantity. We just observe the total bundle of those two things. So because we want to take this equation to some data and see if the trade cost and the substitutability of the goods are enough to explain the fact that people consume much more at home, much more that's produced at home rather than is produced abroad, we want to be able to connect this to data. And to do that, we need to figure out how to change this equation into an equation in revenues when we don't measure pH very well. Okay. So first we observe that CH divided by CF, this is just from the consumer's problem, is equal to PF divided by PH to the power theta. So that was the first row on the last slide. We derived that. Okay, so we can actually connect here PF divided by PH, and we can sort of get this transitivity and skip out this middle term here. Then you see that we're raising both of these terms to the power theta. All right, so let's eliminate the theta, and then we want to flip so that the pH is on top. Right now the PF is on top, so we're going to put a negative sign here, and then we're going to take both sides to the power to a negative power. That's a lot of steps, so let me just write it out here. So we're going to note, I'll just do it this way, 1 minus tau. I'm just going to rewrite what's there on that equation, skipping out on the middle term. All right, now we're going to raise both of these sides to the power 1 divided by negative theta. All right. Okay, so we're going to end up with the thetas canceling out. We're going to have 1 minus tau to the power negative 1. And over here, we're going to have PF divided by PH to the power negative 1. But then we can just write PH divided by PF is equal to 1 divided 1 minus tau to the power negative 1, which is what we have here in this equation. All right. Okay, so let's combine this equation and this equation. So we're going to multiply the left-hand sides and the right-hand sides. All right, so we're going to get that's right. I mean, that's all there's to say, right? So we're going to multiply PH divided by PF times CH divided by CF, and we're going to get this side. Then we're going to multiply 1 divided by 1 minus tau to the power theta with 1 divided by 1 minus tau to the power negative 1. And we're going to get this expression, of course, because x to the power theta times x to the power negative 1 is equal to x to the power theta minus 1. Right? So here x is 1 divided by 1 minus tau. All right, so this is perfect. Now we have something here that we can observe. That's the amount that a country spends on goods produced on its own goods. Here's the amount that a country spends on goods from another country. And we observe that in the real world, this is a very, this number is like, well, it's significantly above 1. And then here we can think about what's a reasonable theta. We can think about what's a reasonable tau. Okay, so let's actually take that and look at some data and see what we get. So let's look at a couple of examples. So the first one is no trade costs. So let's set this tau equal to 0. If that's the case, then we have 1, and it doesn't matter what the substitutability is, you're always going to consume exactly the same amounts from home and from foreign, which sort of makes sense, right? I mean, everything is symmetric. If there's no trade costs, why would you favor the good that is from your own country? Next, let's look at these two possible values. If tau is equal to 1/4, 1 minus 1/4 is 3/4. So then we're going to have 4 divided by 3 to the power 6 minus 1, 5. So 4 divided by 3 to the power 5. And now I have to actually do that because I don't know that off the top of my head. I'll do it on my cell phone here. So 4 divided by 3 to the power 5. That's sweet. That can't be right. Did I do something wrong here? Let's see here. 1 minus 1/4, that's 3/4. That's right. 4 divided by 3. Power 5 minus 1. Okay, well, the answer I got here, that can't be right. There must be some sort of problem here with the Google calculator. Let's try this. 1.33333 to the power 5. Well, sure enough it is. So the answer I got here is 4.21. So what that says is that people consume 4 times as much in value from their own country as they consume from the foreign country. This isn't quite the same as what we saw before, but this is a significant. That sounds like that's a significant home bias. It's in the order of what we see in the data. Okay, so are these numbers realistic? Okay, so first theta. So the way I think about theta is through the markup equation that we saw previously. So of course here it's not quite a markup, but it still tells us something about what's a reasonable value of theta. So in a different model, the markup would be theta divided by theta minus 1. So what that says is how much do firms charge more than the cost of their own production. So that's in like a monopolistically competitive model. So if theta is equal to 6, this would be 6 divided by 5, which would be 20%. 1.2. So that sounds eminently reasonable to me as what type of markup firms charge. So this seems like a decently reasonable approximation. Of course, this is a totally different model, and you should think about this as sort of a rule of thumb, but it seems sort of reasonable to me, the level of theta that we have here. Tau, however, tau of 0.25, that seems like a very expensive trade cost. So that says that if you put 100 units on the boat and send it to a foreign country, then by the time it gets there, there's only 75 units left. That seems very expensive. So let's see whether that's a reasonable trade cost. So if we think about all traded goods in the world, freight's about 3% of value. Right? So here you might say, well, tau is 9.97%. But of course, many goods aren't traded, so they have sort of a trade cost that's like infinite. You can't send a haircut abroad. So you're averaging this tradable version with the non-tradable infinite version, and it's hard to average infinites. But in addition to this 3%, tariffs also average 3 to 5% of value, so that takes another couple of percentage points off of that. And then in addition, we don't have them here, but there's non-tariff barriers as well. Things like, we haven't talked about trade at all, so I can use all these examples for the first time, but an example might be the color of brake lights. So in Denmark, I believe, now I also have to look out the window because I never remember which country is which. Maybe I can actually, hold on a second. Okay, so it looks to me like the brake lights here in Denmark are, I'm going to say red. But in the United States, they're a different color. I can't see, this is terrible. I should have prepared this example better, but it's a different color of the lights on the back of the car. If you want to drive a car in the United States versus drive a car in Denmark, you have to have different colors of lights on the back. And, there's no real good reason why one color is better than the other. And in fact, if all of the countries coordinated, then it would make things cheaper for consumers, because you'd be able to buy cars from the United States and more easily drive them on the roads in Denmark. But they keep them differently, partly because it's a trade barrier. So, Peugeot or Citroën and Ford and GM, they don't want these rules to be changed because they want to have these sort of protections on their own home markets. So in addition to the tariffs, in addition to the freight, there's also non-tariff barriers that also take some of this, that also are a cost of trade. So when you put all these things together, maybe that 25% trade cost isn't so crazy. Maybe that's actually kind of reasonable, right? So that's kind of all I have to say. We ended up with that 4-to-1 ratio for what you buy at home relative to what you buy abroad, which seems high, but that's largely in line with what we'd see in a country. So Denmark's a little higher because it's so small, but if we looked at a bigger country like the UK or France or Germany, or especially the United States, their trade is a much lower part of GDP. So I think that in the United States, trade to GDP ratio is maybe 15%, something like that. So this 4-to-1 ratio is kind of reasonable for the United States at least. Okay, so this home bias, while it seems kind of incredible, it can be caused by trade costs that seem somewhat reasonable. It's the obvious answer, right? Why do people consume what's at home? It's because it's cheaper, because it's too expensive to buy what's produced abroad. So the innovation in this paper, this part isn't super surprising. Trade costs seem like a fairly direct way of causing home bias. The innovation in the paper is really that we can also use trade costs to explain all these other puzzles as well. So I'll turn to that next in the next video.